So it's a late night and this guy goes and cleans carpets at restaurants after hours. So he is heading to his shift and he is on a highway that's very, very dark and he's heading to his work. Next thing you know, out of nowhere, someone crosses the line, a drunk driver hits him, he's in the ditch, and it's not looking good at all. So he's sitting in his car, cannot move. All of a sudden, the drunk driver comes like over to him to start yelling at him through the window, starts getting ready to like attack him in his car, and he cannot move. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a big, tall man shows up, and he was like, "What's going on here?" And the guy who hit him, the drunk guy, stumbled back, and he's like, "Well, this guy got in my way, yada, yada, whatever." Next thing you know, paramedics are called. The guy that cannot move in his car, he's in really, really bad condition. Get him to the hospital, and sadly, his parents get a phone call in the middle of the night that they need to get to the hospital ASAP. It is not looking good at all. So the family that just got the phone call about their child, they get to the hospital, and the doctor says it's not looking good at all. He's in critical condition. He has a hole in his lung, and he has a broken neck. So the parents, of course, are totally beside themselves. They're out in the waiting room. They don't know how to take this. They don't know what to do. They're praying. They're doing everything they know possible to do. And their boy, who is now paralyzed, is in his hospital room just right up the hallway. And he's laying there and there's no movement. Things are not looking good at all. Then all of a sudden, the same man that came to him when he was in his car and yelled at that drunk guy, "What's going on?" showed back up in his room. And he came up and he put his hand right on his shoulder and he said, "You're going to be just fine." And he walked out, and next thing you know, a nurse walks in, and this kid sits up, and he's like, "Hey, can you go see if my parents are here?" And the nurse is just like, "Oh my gosh, like, you were just paralyzed. Like, there was very, very, very little chances of anything good happening, and you're now talking to me. Like, this is a miracle." So, of course, she runs, gets the parents, whatever. They check this log. They check the cameras. Nobody walked in that room. Nobody checked the log to go see a visitor. Nothing showed up on the cameras. Who was this mysterious man? There is a family who is staying at the hospital for a long time because their little one is very, very sick. And sadly, she has cancer and they're going to have to stay there for a while. So the mom is holding a 10-month-old baby and then holding the hand of her 4-year-old daughter while their other baby is in the hospital. So she's walking in to the hospital and all of a sudden the little baby just starts giggling behind her. And the mom is, trying to get to her child's room, and then the 4-year-old turns around and starts giggling, and the mom's like, "This is kind of eerie." And so she just continues to walk to get to her other child's room, and they both start giggling again. And so the mom is like, "What are you guys giggling at?" And they just point, and they don't say a name or anything, they just point. About that time, the staff of the hospital comes and finds her and lets her know, sadly, her oldest child has passed away. So, unfortunately, this older baby was saying goodbye to their siblings, and they were laughing, having a good time. So, as heartbreaking it is, that is very, very peaceful for that mama's heart. I guarantee it. So this lady had just had her 3rd baby, and her husband had been with her the entire time at the hospital, and she'd had a really long delivery. And after a few days, the husband was like, "I'm going to go home. I'm going to tidy up the house because you're going to be leaving soon." She had a C-section, so she had to stay for about 4 to 5 days. So she said, "Okay, no big deal." So as soon as she left, a nurse walked in and she said, "I'm just going to stay with you and keep you company while your husband has to go away." And she was like, "Okay, that's great." Well, it'd been a really long day and the nurse had been amazing. And every time the other nurses would come in, she would go to the corner and she'd say, "I'm just going to stay out of everyone's way in case they, need to do anything." So as soon as the nurses would walk in, she would go like kind of to her corner area, and the nurses wouldn't even acknowledge her. They would just talk to the mama about the new baby. And she was doing everything she could to keep her company and talk to her. As soon as the nurses left, she would come back and, just socialize like she was before. And so she said, "I'm going to be leaving soon." And so she gave her a hug and then blew the baby a kiss, and she walked out of the room. Shortly after the nurse had left, the husband showed up and he was like, "I'm so sorry it took so long." And by that time, another nurse had came in to start changing sheets. And she said, "It's okay. There was a nurse named Kelly that was here and she was hanging out with me all day, just making sure I didn't need anything." And the nurse looked up at her and she said, "There hasn't been any other nurse here with you." And she said, "Yes, there was. She was with me all day." So the nurse leaves and she goes to talk to the doctor, and she tells the doctor that she thinks she might be hallucinating and seeing somebody that's actually not there. And she said, no, she was actually here. She was talking to me. She was helping me with the baby. And this nurse is like, there was nobody else on the shift. So the nurses and the doctors talking, and next thing you know, all of the nurses are talking to each other. They're talking about who this Kelly person might be, what this mom might see. Then the mom starts freaking out, wondering if somebody was in her room trying to take her baby, because unfortunately, that's been told before, where people dress up as nurses and unfortunately take someone's baby. So early evening, the nighttime nurse came in and she said, so you had Nurse Kelly come in your room? And this girl's like, yes, finally, like somebody believes me. She pulls out her phone and she shows her a picture. And she said, is this Nurse Kelly? And it was from early 2000s. And she said, yes, that's her. That's the lady that was in my room with me. And she said, well, sadly, this is Nurse Kelly who used to live here. And she was in a domestic relationship and hasn't been with us for 10 years. So the mom is just in shock because she's like, this lady was in my room. And the nurse who showed her the picture is relieved because she said, I'm just so happy to know that my friend has moved over and she is like in a much better place. And the mom to this day wishes she could go back and talk to that Nurse Kelly one more time.